Welcome to Access Zen with Gregory Foster. Our program will help you set a more perfect balance between your inner world and the outside world. And now, here's your host, Gregory Foster.
And good morning. I'm Gregory Foster, and you're listening to Access Zen, another beautiful day wherever you are. Hopefully you're having as great a week as I know I'm having, and I know our guest Irene is having. Hey, we've got just a really special show today, very thought-provoking and deep in content. And it's something that I've been wanting to do for quite some time, and it's finally come together. So the theme of today is life after life, transforming our thoughts about dying and living. Wow. So Irene Kendig is going to be on, and she's going to be talking about her wonderful book. It's won an incredible amount of awards. She'll be on shortly to tell you about that. It's called Conversations with Jerry and Other People I Thought Were Dead. So essentially 7 compelling dialogues that will transform the way we think about dying and living. So she's going to be on in just a few moments. I do want to do a little special dedication to this show, especially the theme. My best friend passed away. His name is Roger Oker, so we're going to dedicate this show to him. I know he's out there listening, so thank you, Roger, for being a part of our show. So I had a couple of things that I wanted to read from Roger. Roger was a very special person. He was born in June 1940, and he crossed over, as Irene will share with us what that means, in mid-January of 2010. So Roger was a very special person. He'd had some poisoning, and he had to have a special valves put into his heart, and almost died about 25 years ago. And so, he went through his life, went through an incredible amount of hardships and pain and struggle, but he always found a way to look at the brighter side of things. He was phenomenally independent, and about 2 years before he passed away, he got very severe form of bone cancer. Anyone out there knows that it takes a great toll on your energy and strength. But I will tell you, if you were around Roger, you never knew he had it. He had just an incredible spirit and will to live. So I wanted to just read to you a nice little saying that he had. This is something he wrote about 3 weeks before he passed away. It's titled, "What's Important in Life? Animals, people that have nothing and are disenfranchised, reaching out. You have to reach out to people on a daily basis, to people that you have never met, doing what we have to do. Largely, we go through life and we just don't reach out to perfect strangers that need our help to make tonight a little bit better for them. I find largely they are really appreciative of that. A lot of these people have mental illnesses and other issues that they have to deal with, and they can't get the help that they need." So as you can tell, Roger was someone who really volunteered a great deal of his time to the care of really lost animals. He was always going out, at nighttime and feeding cats that were lost and kind of lonely, and he would give them a little bit of comfort at night. He was well known to go down to Santa Monica and give out food to the homeless. So he really, what he just read there, that's how he lived his life. And Roger, I want to read one more thing, and then we're gonna bring on Irene, because I think it's kind of fitting. So Roger had an incredibly positive outlook on life, no matter what he went through, and he came up with this formula. It's called an Amazing Life Formula, and I'll just read you the top 10 things he has on it. He says, number one thing, have an amazing life. Leave no opportunity wasted. Ditch the excuses. Explore new possibilities. Eliminate barriers. Do it now. Have freedom from fear and inhibition. Take control of your life. Create it now. Take the amazing journey filled with direction, innovation, creativity, and empowerment. Thank you, Roger. And we could probably have an entire show just dedicated to that man and his concepts. So again, the theme of today's show, life after life, transforming our thoughts about dying and living. And I want to bring on Irene Kendig. Irene, how are you today?
I am phenomenal. Thank you, Greg. And your friend Roger sounds absolutely amazing, and I'm delighted to, be a part of a show that's dedicated to his spirit.
Well, thank you. And I know he feels the same way. So we have a few minutes before we're going to go on a break here. I thought we would take just this little segment here to kind of get a good sense of who you are, your background. Tell us about the book, some of the awards it's won, and what kind of inspired you to write it. And then when we come back from the break, I know you've got about 22 of your chapters in here are dedicated to a very special person also by the name of Jerry. So
yes.
Please share it with us.
Well, thank you. I had an interesting experience back in 2006 when a friend called to tell me about a woman with an extraordinary gift. And she said that this woman could communicate with those who'd crossed over. And she asked me if I would be willing to do a session with the woman. Her name is Jana Anna. And I hesitated because I had just started a master's program in spiritual psychology, and I had a lot on my plate. And even if she did have this extraordinary gift, there really wasn't anyone I felt compelled to speak to who'd passed on. And yet I was curious. So I scheduled an appointment. I thought I was doing my friend a favor, and I scheduled an appointment. She said, Jana wouldn't charge anything for the session. And I really expected nothing. I sat on the futon in my office, and I placed a pad of paper and a pen next to me, and on the other side, my little dog Scooter sat on the other side of me, and she suggested that I give her the first name only of someone who had died that I wanted to connect with. So I said Biba, and I didn't tell her that Biba was my mom or that she had transitioned or crossed over 3 years prior to that. And before I knew it, she was saying things about my mother, from my mother, that were extraordinary. My jaw just dropped open. And when she asked me if I had any questions for Biba, I said, I was so astonished that I had connected with her that I said, so how are you? And that was the beginning of a series, actually of 2 years' worth of conversations with 7 people on the other side, 7 loved ones, with conversation beginning with the same question: what did you experience when you released your last breath on Earth? And
what did you experience when you released your last breath on Earth? Well, that's profound.
Yes, and each person takes me on an extraordinary journey, and I ask questions that really not only explore the hereafter, but allow us to live life now using the wisdom that they have to offer. So my life transformed as a result of writing the book. And when it was published, it within 6 months of coming out, it won 3 national awards, and it has recently been endorsed by Neil Donald Walsh, the New York Times bestselling author of Conversations with God. And,
yes, that's a wonderful book.
Yeah, and it just hit bestseller status in the death and dying category on Amazon.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I do want to say, and we're going to take a break here in a few minutes, but there's a couple things I want to say. One is, this book, I want to tell you something. I don't read a whole lot of books, as many as I should, but when I read your book, I found myself several times pausing and bringing my wife in, and then I would read it out loud. It was so deep and compelling, and I would encourage any listener to get this book, and maybe form a little study group, because there's so much depth of wisdom that is shared here. It really is profound, I have to tell you.
Oh, I'm so glad that you enjoyed it, and it certainly transformed my life. And I know many readers write and tell me that they find peace, especially when they've had a loved one who's transitioned, that it helps them to look at things with new eyes, with fresh eyes.
Yeah, and that kind of brings me to my second point, and I think maybe we want to get into a little bit of this, and that is talking about the concepts that we have here in the West about death and dying, right? Isn't there kind of a certain precept, and we wear black, it's somber, it's final, and we're in, remorse sometimes for years, right? Isn't that kind of the Western approach?
Yeah, and also that, that there's heaven and hell, and that when we transition that we'll be judged A lot of people I know live in a lot of fear of Judgment Day. And in fact, their behavior oftentimes is determined by the avoidance of punishment on that Judgment Day. So I ask these questions: is there a Judgment Day? Is there a heaven? Is there a hell? And I have seven loved ones who provide answers to those compelling questions.
Now, one of the folks that passed away actually committed suicide. Is that right?
That's right. My friend Bill was in his 30s when he committed suicide, and I was particularly excited about these conversations because there are so many people who are suffering unnecessarily, who have had a loved one commit suicide and think that if only they would have done X or, might have done Y, that they could have prevented their loved one from committing suicide. And Bill provides insight that will relieve people of any guilt or unnecessary suffering that they may be experiencing.
That's great. Looking forward to getting into that. So what were your thoughts before you started working with Jana Anna? What were your thoughts on the afterlife? How sure were you that there was an afterlife?
Well, I was probably 95% sure that we go on. But there was always this nagging doubt. Whenever I would get into a place of questioning myself or, if I were experiencing depression or anything like that, low self-esteem, always those thoughts would come around of, well, maybe we go on, but maybe we don't. And again, just kind of a nagging doubt. After I wrote the book, I had absolutely no more doubt. My doubt disappeared. And in fact, just 2 weeks ago, I was in Virginia Beach at the Edgar Cayce Center for the Advancement of Research and Enlightenment. And I was doing a couple of presentations there. And I really had the experience of absolutely no fear associated with dying anymore. And to be at such a level of peace, which I wasn't quite, when I finished the book I was at peace, but now it's just, it's so much deeper and more profound that I know that I'm living in a loving and beneficent universe. And I have absolute trust, so there is no longer any fear associated with the idea of transitioning.
That's beautiful. Let's pick that up when we come back from the break. I'm Gregory Foster, and you're listening to Access Zen.
And now, let's return to Access Zen.
We're back. We're just starting to get into a very compelling conversation here with Irene Kendig. Irene, please continue where you left off on your. I know you were talking about the Edgar Cayce show and how you now have a tremendous sense of peace relating to death. Speak about that.
Well, I actually spent the night. They provided a place for me to spend the night, and I laid down to go to sleep. Only I never slept the entire night. I basically was meditating all night long, and I had a sense that I would be transitioning soon. And I didn't know if that was true or not. I just had this kind of knowing that I might be transitioning soon. And when I looked at how I felt about that. And as I mentioned, there was no fear. What there was a sense of elation and freedom of, oh my gosh, school's out. You know how you used to feel when, the last day before summer vacation? It was like elation.
Oh, yeah.
School's out. Well, that's what it felt like for me. And I actually talked to my kids and my husband, and they said, listen, I don't know whether I'm accurate or not, and, I may have 50 more years on the planet. Who knows? But I want to make sure that you're okay with that if that should come to pass. And so it was wonderful to talk to my loved ones, my kids, my husband, and to feel so complete that if I went tomorrow, if I transitioned tomorrow, I'm really good with it.
Wow, and this just happened recently for you, right?
Just 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
And then my niece
so I just saw you at the project. And by the way, the project wouldn't be the same without you, so we can't lose you just yet,
Oh, thank you. Well, I was talking to my niece, and she said, well, maybe it's not that you're transitioning, but maybe you needed to reach that level of peace with the process because of the work that you do. And I said, well, that may well be. And it doesn't matter either way. When you get to that place, it doesn't matter because we continue to evolve in consciousness. To me, it doesn't matter whether it's here in physical world reality or in non-physical reality. I'm still evolving in consciousness. And, I like me, and I like being with me, so it's all good.
Well, that's beautiful. It really sounds like you just have a wonderful sense of knowing, and that's a very different place of being than thinking or believing, right?
Exactly, and I think that's the gift that this journey has been for me, that I used to think about, that we go on, but now it isn't a function of thinking. That's very accurate and very insightful. It's a function of knowing, and there's a world of difference between thinking and knowing.
So let's take a step back for a second, because folks may be listening to this and they might be a little bit surprised, and maybe not. I mean, obviously there's a lot of shows on television with mediums that contact people that have crossed over, but your experience is so much more personal and forgive me, but deeper in terms of the way you bring it home in the book and just listening to you talk. So if I'm someone that still has fear about death, or maybe I've lost a loved person, and I kind of cling to that old concept of death being it, and I'm sad. How would you speak to someone like that now that you kind of have a better sense of it?
Well, I do soul-centered coaching, and so what I do is I encourage people to look at their beliefs. And we're so good about doing spring cleaning of our closets and our drawers in our house, but oftentimes we forget to do spring cleaning with our own thoughts, with our beliefs. And so I invite people to look at what beliefs you've learned either through your family of origin or through the culture, through religion, and to explore which beliefs serve you and which ones may need to be updated. Mm-hmm. And so I used to think, for example, that, people sat on, when I was a kid, that people sat on clouds playing harps, and from what I understand from all of my loved ones is that as we continue to evolve in consciousness, we continue to grow. So we don't suddenly become wise when we transition. Sometimes people think, well, as soon as I transition, I'll be a wise person. And this is not the case. You continue on from where you are. And so it behooves the question, if you're not living heaven on earth right now, what's keeping you? Why not? What are you waiting for? There's not some event down the line that's going to make it all okay. We're evolving in consciousness. And to the degree that we know who we are right now, our inner essence, we carry that with us as we transition from physical world reality to non-physical reality.
That's great. So I want to just stay here for a second, because I think there's some really great pearls of wisdom. So I know that in your book you kind of talk about how when you were younger and your son was younger and he asked you about death. Tell me about that. And then also an interesting quote you have in your book about President Obama being asked a similar question by his little girl, because I think that's kind of pertinent with probably what happens in a lot of households in America, right?
Absolutely. Well, when my son asked me, he was 3 years old, and he said, "Mommy, what happens when we die?" And I have always had a very truthful and honest relationship with him, and I said, "I don't know what happens when we die, and I don't know if anyone knows." And he didn't like my answer, but again, we've always had a relationship based on honesty. And after I had the first session with Jana Anna, I called my son and told him that I had spoken with Biba, his grandmother, and what she had said. And I said, I have another answer to your... Do you remember the question that you asked me when you were 3 about what happens when we die? And he said, I do. And I said, well, I have a different answer to your question. I know with certainty now that we go on. And so Barack Obama, in his book, The Audacity of Hope, he tells a similar experience of his daughter, Sasha, asking him, what happens when we die? And he said to her, you've got a long, long way before you have to worry about that. And he thinks that, although his answer had satisfied his daughter, that he wasn't sure that he'd said the right thing, and he wondered whether he should have told her the truth, that he wasn't sure what happens when we die. And so we had similar experiences, and we chose different answers. But it's
Sure.
it's a question that probably most parents are presented with when their children are very, very young.
Yeah, I think what I see, a lot of the professional folks that I associate with their kids, they don't really give an answer either. They just kind of say, well, cycle of life, there's birth and then there's death. They kind of, take that Lion King type approach to their explanation. Have you seen that as well?
Well, I would say there is no death. I would say there's birth and there's birth.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, there's
So
birth.
you also talked about, growth continuum. And so I had an interesting question to kind of ask you, because what I heard you saying is, when you cross over, it's not like you get the harps and you get the wings and now you're wise. It's like, where you left off in your growth. And I heard you reference the earth being kind of a school and getting out of school. And you're looking at transitioning and death in a whole new way. And I love that.
Yes.
What would happen, taking that concept, what would happen if every human on earth knew with the same certainty, from a level of knowing, not a level of belief or understanding, but a deep knowing? How would the world change?
Well, I think if you know this, that deep knowingness, then you know who you are. Because a lot of our misunderstanding about death and dying comes from a misunderstanding about our own identity and who we are. So a lot of people think that they are their personality, or they are their behaviors. And I would say that as a result of that comes confusion about other things as well. So if we all knew who we are at our essence, which is love, which is compassion, which is generosity and kindness and peace and joy, and we were living from that place, what would happen is the whole world would be in a state of peace. Not because we were trying to change anyone or to fight for peace, but because we would have discovered that that's who we are, and we would be expressing from that place.
Instead of the world we live in today, which is, it's so transactional and impermanent, and no one lives past about 120 years, and I'm not sure you'd really want to, right? So there's a sense of this can't be all there is, right? I think that's where most people are at, don't you think?
I do. But to live with the certainty that not only are we eternal, but that this is a loving and beneficent universe, allows us to ask different questions when we're faced with challenges. So that instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Why is this bad thing happening to me? Or that kind of question, which puts us kind of in the role of victim, the questions that you ask are different. There are questions like, what would my soul have wanted me to learn from this experience? What can I gain from this? How can I grow from this? What do I need to let go in order to not suffer here? So the questions are different when we're living from that place and when we know that we're eternal. And even though the knowing that we are eternal, one might think, well, if you know that you're eternal, then you tend to kick back. But that's not the case, because this physical world reality, this lifetime, is finite. It begins at birth into the physical world, and it ends at birth into the non-physical world. And so it's very finite. And life becomes much more purposeful when you know who you are.
Now, we're going to take a break here in a second, but they don't give us that manual when we get here, right?
I know that. Trust me, I worked hard to know this.
And the years that we spent together at USM working this process and kind of getting through those layers, that's really what spiritual psychology is getting through those layers of ego, of mental, of emotional, and getting down to that place of who we really are, the essence, which is what you're talking about. Yes. Coming from that place of orientation totally shifts our look at this place, right? Doesn't it?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a world of difference. And that's what I think people get a sense of that from reading conversations with Jerry and other people I thought were dead. They get a sense of what's possible. What's possible in terms of living right now, right here, right now. Forget about the afterlife. You're going to get that anyway. But it's I think what's most important is how can you live the life of your dreams right now, and how can you be in touch with that part of yourself that is eternal?
Wonderful. When we come back from the break, we're going to talk a lot about Jerry, because Jerry has a lot to share with us. I'm Gregory Foster. You're listening to Access Zen.
And now, let's return to Access Zen.
And we're back with Irene Kendig, and we're talking about conversations with Jerry and other people I thought were dead. So thank you very much so far for this very, very compelling conversation, Irene. Really, really appreciate it.
My pleasure. I love sharing these ideas and concepts and practices.
Yes. And we're gonna give the readers, or listeners and readers, a chance to get your book, because I really think this might be one of the best books written in the last couple of years. And I read probably about 15, 20 books, a year, but this one really takes me to a deep place. I just want to share that with everyone. And so you have 20. So how many total conversations do you have with the 7 folks at Crossover? And walk us through that process again, just so we're all up to speed on how this thing works.
Right. So how it worked was that when I had that initial session with Jana Anna, and I connected with my mom, that particular day in that hour-long session, I connected with a total of 4 loved ones. And each one came through in a way that it was really disarming. It was just, oh my gosh, I just never expected it. At the end of that session, about 3 days went by. I spent most of those 3 days dancing around my house, elated, knowing that we go on. And then I called Jana and asked her, and we did another session, a second session. At the end of that session, I asked her if she was interested in collaborating on a book, and she said she was. So we met. She's in Indiana. I'm in Virginia. So we had our sessions by phone for an hour every day, 5 days a week for 2 years.
Wow.
And I would ask the questions, and she would channel the answers. And I really just started looking at who did I know who transitioned. And from there, chose, it was really kind of an organic process. I didn't give a lot of thought to it. It was more like the 7 that came forward. And I was thrilled that one of them was my friend Bill, because, as I mentioned, he committed suicide, and I thought those would be particularly valuable conversations.
Yes, and I want to get to Bill, but before we do that, tell us about Jerry. Who is Jerry, and what was his life story about?
Jerry was my girlfriend's husband. He had a transcendent experience when he was 9 years old and dedicated his life to God. So he became a minister and fought for people's rights, and then in his later years, he started traveling to Japan and studying with a Zen master who's considered a Japanese treasure. So about 3 weeks before he transitioned, he had a tumor, and he was given about 2 months to live. And 3 weeks before he actually transitioned, he was ordained as a Buddhist priest. So he started off as a Lutheran minister and ended as a Buddhist priest, which was quite a spiritual journey.
How cool is that?
Yeah. So he came through with tremendous clarity, and is kind of the 7 people. He's the one that pops in during the other conversations as well, and offers clarity and insight when needed.
So Jerry strikes me as a very highly conscious, evolved soul from Jump Street. Is that right?
Absolutely. And he was that while he was here in physical reality. So it wasn't that he suddenly became wise. It was that he spent a lifetime dedicated in service to God.
Beautiful. Well, I was very moved, and I am very moved by Jerry. So I want you to walk us through something. And this is a little bit technical, but there's this concept of, everyone's like, well, what is the soul? Where is the soul? How can I see it? How can I measure it? Right? You've heard that discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So walk us through this. You walk us through this beautiful concept of energy coming into this physical vessel And you kind of use almost like a power plant example of the actual soul energy that we possess, or soul body, I think you actually use as part of the words. It's actually much bigger and more dynamic than probably what this normal human vessel could handle. And so there's kind of a sharing of energy, so we're not bringing 100% of everything. Can you walk me through that? I found that to be very profound.
Sure. I know the conversation that you're talking about. It is a kind of a technical conversation, but Jerry talks about that the soul is so huge that he compares it like to a transformer, so that in your home your transformer provides current of electricity to your lamps and to your electronics in your home, because if it didn't go through that process from the transformer to the lights, you would short circuit everything because it would be too much. And that the soul is kind of like that, so that rather than so that when we're here on earth, we're connected to our soul. We have access, much like that transformer. It's that it's in amounts that we can handle. That energy is in amounts that we can handle. I don't know if that's clear. One of the things that I ask my mother in one of the conversations with my mother is, at what point does the soul, is the soul in the womb when a woman is pregnant with a child? Yes. And she and Jerry say that the womb would be too confining for the soul, that the soul is monitoring the physical development of the body in the womb from outside the womb, from non-physical reality. Okay, so that and I say, well, why would the soul monitor the body from outside the physical body? And he says, because the womb would be too small for the yes. soul. And so we actually get into conversations about abortion, miscarriages, and all of these things that Jerry and the others provide a much deeper, more profound understanding of what goes on, which I think will help a lot of women who've had miscarriages or abortions also to be at peace with that as well.
Thank you for saying that, because that's kind of where I wanted. You did that beautifully, by the way. Great explanation. Very high concept. But I wanted to emphasize it because it shifts our perception of what we think reality is, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And in fact, my mother says regarding abortion that it is actually an agreement not just between the mother and the soul of the child, but it's an agreement with the whole soul family, because everyone has the opportunity to grow from the experience. I remember I had a miscarriage once, and I remember thinking that I'd done something wrong, and that it was my fault. And I really suffered because of that. And what I've come to discover is that I didn't do anything wrong, that sometimes the soul of the child completes what it came to do while it's in the womb.
And then we may develop some profound misunderstanding from our human point of view, right? Exactly. That's where suffering comes from, is the human, correct?
Exactly. When we judge that we've done something wrong, or that, it should have been different than how it was. But, that's that part of us, too, that when we can trust that everything is unfolding in divine order, and then we don't have to, judge that it should have been different than how it was, that's when we can really, really expand in consciousness and grow. And I think that's what we came here to do, is to evolve spiritually.
And so I totally agree with you. So it's kind of a learning orientation to life, which is kind of what the message I get from Jerry, right? So walk me through, and if you want to read anything, that's fine. If not, that's okay too. Walk us through, I think you asked Jerry that profound question of what was it like after you took your first breath, and give us a sense of what he experienced, if you don't mind.
He said that he kept breathing, which was astonishing.
Wow.
He kept breathing, but his body wasn't responding. And he talks about his release being gentle, that he practically melted out of his body. He says he felt cold just before losing consciousness in his physical body, and then warm again as he transitioned into non-physical form. But he says that this warmth was different than feeling warmed by an outside source, because the warmth came from within. And he thought that breathing was limited to a physical body, so he was quite surprised. He says he breathes with his whole body. And I say, well, what are you breathing in? And he says, life force. And that
life force. Wow.
Life force.
That's deep.
And I know. And he says that breathing in non-physical form is for the purpose of maintaining the spirited body. It serves the purpose of connection. So when you inhale, you're receiving the oneness, and when we exhale, we're giving back to the oneness. So it's a unifying process.
It's beautiful.
And I asked him if he was aware. Were you consciously aware? When of the actual moment you left your physical body? And he says, no, it was like moving from one room to another through a doorway without being conscious of the doorway, only of having changed rooms.
And, which is kind of almost like at a quantum physics level, because we've heard scientists measure this and talk about this even in our human level, that there's particles that behave very similar to the way you just described. So that sounds pretty consistent.
Yes. And when you contrast that with what my friend Jared said, who was 30 when he transitioned, and he was in a lot of physical pain. He had injured his back and had a couple of back surgeries that hadn't gone well, so he was on morphine and in a lot of pain. And he says that when he transitioned, it was like being shot out of his body, like a bullet out of a gun. But he says he was chomping at the bit to be released because he'd been so miserable. So each person has a different experience, and they recount exactly what they experienced in those moments when they released their last breath on earth. Each person brings a slightly different experience. Jerry is melting out of his body while Jared is shooting out of his body. But each experience is appropriate for each person, given what they're experiencing.
That's just incredible. And all 7 of these folks are real people, as told through this wonderful medium, Jana Anna.
Right.
We're going to come back in about a minute from a break here, Irene, and I want you to continue with this and also share with us some of the additional wisdom that Jerry had for us. I'm Gregory Foster, and you're listening to Access Zen.
And now, let's return to Access Zen.
I'm Gregory Foster. You're listening to Access Zen, and we're just having a wonderful, deep conversation with Irene today and her incredible book, Conversations with Jerry and Other People I Thought Were Dead. And what I find so, thought-provoking about the book is it's not like it's a tell-all book. It's not like you're trying to sensationalize the concept. It's like you're going to a deep place. You are at a deep place, and you're channeling a lot of incredible wisdom. Would that be accurate?
I think that's accurate. And I think the book has a kind of an energetic quality to it that actually it transforms people as they read it. I mean, people have aha moments, and it's as if their own life is illuminated as they read the book.
Yeah, and that's exactly how I felt when I was reading it. I got that same sense that I don't want to read too fast. It's like there's so many great nuggets here. So why don't we do this? Since we've got about 8 or 9 minutes left, take a few minutes and let's talk about some of the other stories in the book, and then I want you to come back and share with us some of the deeper points of wisdom that the spirits shared with you. Okay.
Well, one of the concepts that all 7 people shared that was consistent with all 7 is the idea of a life review. Only Jerry describes it just beautifully. He says, it's nothing like you could ever imagine from the perspective of an individuated being. As I reviewed every moment of my physical life, I experienced how I felt and how I affected everyone and everything around me from their perspective. I experienced myself through them. I shared their thoughts and felt their feelings, people, animals, plants, and all sentient life. And how do you put that into words? And each person tells me the same thing, that they re-experienced their entire life, moment by moment, from the time from their awareness of being in the womb, all the way through. And my mother says that if you had told her that she would be re-experiencing her life, she would have freaked out before. But that this review takes place in a space of unconditional love and acceptance, and that you're observing your life without judgment. You're simply assessing what's complete, what still needs to be healed, what needs to be learned, that kind of thing, and always in a space of unconditional love. So as a result of hearing this from all 7 of my loved ones, it's changed the way I live moment to moment. So I can be, for example, standing in line at the grocery store and knowing that I'm going to review that moment and how I'm affecting the people around me from their perspective, which is extraordinary. I don't even have to speak to anyone. I'm aware of how I'm affecting life around me energetically. Because if I'm going to re-experience this moment, I want to experience it the first time wonderfully, and when I re-experience it, I want to do it with consciousness. And so it allows me to bring a sense of awareness and consciousness to each moment. I don't take any moment for granted, and that's extraordinary.
So the essence of this is there's no sadness or judgment. It's simply awareness and energetic connection to everyone and everything.
Absolutely. And which makes sense, doesn't it? Because there's no perceived separation anymore. And so you can experience all the different points of view in the space of oneness.
You can see how folks can get, all of us, myself included, can, waiting in line and impatient, and why is that person taking so long, versus a perspective of, hey, it's just an event, it's just a moment, let me go with the flow. It totally shifts how you even react, right?
Absolutely. And one of the things that everyone says as a result of their life review is that they see that unconditional love was always available at every moment. And that when they judged or when they had low self-esteem and judged that they were inadequate or unworthy or undeserving of the love, that they basically, it's like an unconditional loving spout that's constantly on, but that we are the ones that turn it off and don't allow it. And so one of the things that I am always aware of, even if I'm in a moment of temporary upset, is I stop and I say, well, unconditional love is always available. What am I doing? What am I doing to prevent myself from experiencing it? And this gives me great freedom and power to look and see how I'm stopping the flow, because the flow is always there.
And this is uniform with all 7 of the folks that you interviewed. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things, Greg, that Jerry says is he says that your heart's desire is always the highest priority in life. Your heart's desire.
Heart's desire. Tell us about that. What is a heart's desire? Give me an example of that.
Our soul speaks to us through our heart. Not so much through the mind, but through the heart. So when you're following your heart, when you're doing what comes from the heart that fills you up, you're actually following your soul in that way. You're actually listening to your soul. And, Jerry talks about how when he was on Earth, his life was divided between things he wanted to do and things he had to do. But that in spirit, there is only his heart's desire. So when he participates in an experience, there are no distractions, there's nothing he has to do, it's all, he's following his heart's desire and he's guided by wisdom. So when I heard that Jerry could go from what he loves to what he loves to what he loves in spirit, I thought, why not do that here and now? Why wait? So I started going from what I love to what I love to what I love, guided by wisdom. And what that means is that if I'm doing the dishes, I'm loving doing the dishes. I bring my love to doing the dishes.
Wow.
And
love and joy in everything that we do.
In everything, in every moment. And so we can really create a masterpiece of our lives when we acknowledge what's possible and how powerful we are to create. We are such powerful creators.
Yes. Wow, that's really, really profound when you take a step back, because, a lot of times people ask, well, if God existed, there wouldn't be pain and war and suffering, right? You've heard that, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is one of those ways of thinking that it's kind of like when we think of ourselves as our personality or as our behaviors, it's very limited, and it's a kind of a closed circuit that keeps us stuck in thinking that way, and so we use it to prove ourselves right, that, well, then God must not exist if, or what kind of a God would allow this, all those judgments that we have. But if we look at that everything is actually unfolding in divine order, everything is unfolding in divine order, that not a grain of sand is out of place. Nothing happens by accident, and if you're experiencing something, you have to be in alignment with the experience in order for it to come through you. So there are no victims, essentially. Even people who are playing the part of victim are playing it from being a creator and creating the experience of being a victim, which is kind of a far-reaching concept.
So that's kind of the challenge. Thank you for saying that I think a lot of folks have, is that, some folks have really powerful brains, some people are really artistic, they're living this human life, it feels real, kind of like the concept of duality, right? Well, I'm human and I have a soul, and it's really just I'm a soul having a human experience, right?
Exactly, and that's a huge distinction. That is a huge distinction.
How do we get that taught in the schools at an early age? And I don't mean from a religious point of view. I just mean almost from really from a spiritual science point of view, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that we're we're living during such amazing times right now, and I do think that part of what's shifting is consciousness away from the materialistic and the consumerism and the needing to have and me and more to going for that essence that I spoke of. And I think more and more people are wanting to experience what that is at a deeper level. When you think about that, some of the challenges that occur in our lives occur to help us change, to help us deepen, to help us experience more of who we are, then those challenges become loving and beneficent challenges. But we have the choice always. Will we look at it as I'm being punished, or will we look at it as this is a blessing if I can get the learning and the growth out of this?
Irene, we are out of time. Thank you for all of your wonderful insights and the 7 folks that you interviewed for this beautiful book. So real quickly, tell the listeners, how do they reach you? How do they buy your book?
They can go on Amazon.com. It's also available in Kindle format. They can go to BarnesandNoble.com. They can go to the website, www.conversationswithjerry.com.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being on the show this week.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you so much.